people, Wagwan, welcome back to Run's Tech Home, and today I've got the Raspberry Pi 4, the Raspberry Pi 5 and the official cases that come with them. So I'm going to show you how to set this up, put this in a case, install the operating system and get it working for both of these. I might as well do both in the same video because the process is very similar. So for the Raspberry Pi 4, the fan does not come built into the case, whereas I think when I bought the Raspberry Pi 5 with the case, the fan came bundled in because it's recommended that you actually use a fan with the Raspberry Pi 5. Raspberry Pi 4, even though it is still very powerful, you don't have to use a fan with it. It will thermal throttle if it needs to, but the Raspberry Pi 5, you simply have to have heat sinks on it. You simply have to have a fan on there because it's so much more powerful. I'm not going to go over the specs again because I did that in a previous video. I'm simply going to show you how to open the case, how to put these in, how to put the fan on, and how to set everything up. So for the Pi 4 first, to open the case, when you have it facing upwards to you like this, all you have to do is there's an arrow on this side of the case where the HDMI ports are and the power port. So I'm simply going to squeeze that side and then lift, and it comes off quite easily. The way the Raspberry Pi 4 goes in is obviously going to be HDMI ports facing you with the HDMI ports on the case facing you as well. You simply drop it in like this. Now I always go in at an angle, and it has some standoffs here where you can actually screw. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but these four things here, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are standoffs that you can actually screw the Raspberry Pi into. So if you want it to be nice and snug in a case and not moving around too much, I don't mind the moving around too much because I don't move these around very much. That's all you have to do. This is the fan. Actually, let me take this back out and let me put the feet on first because it came with some rubber feet. This will prevent it from sliding around on the table too much or whatever surface you have it on. The Raspberry Pi 5 already came with the feet on there, and these feet are way better in my opinion. These do the job fine, but I feel as if these will come off after a while, whereas these, because they're built into the case, or they seem to be built into the case, I doubt they'll come off as easily. So again, putting the Raspberry Pi 4 back in the case. I'm going to open the fan. The Raspberry Pi 4 came with its own heatsink with the fan, but I'm going to leave this off because I don't want to rip that one off and cause any issues. So I'm just going to put this to one side and use the heatsink that's already on there. It does give some instructions on how to plug this in. So on the side of the box here, it shows that the Raspberry Pi goes into the case normally at the bottom. Then the fan simply goes on top like, I think it's like this. No? Yeah, the fan goes in like this, and then the white part goes on top of it. So I'm just going to try and plug these in to try and get power to it. And the way you plug that in, it shows you here as well. With the Raspberry Pi back in the case, I now need to clip the cooler onto the case. I'm not entirely sure how to do this. I've never done it before, but let's see. It looks like there's a groove here somewhere. So these two end sections here, this side and this side, they go into this groove here and into this groove here as well. So what I did, I simply squeezed them in slightly, line them up where they need to be and push them down. And once they slot in, they actually just jump into place and it doesn't move anymore. So that tells me that the fan is in the case perfectly okay. If I bring the Raspberry Pi 4 case back into frame, now I know for a fact this simply goes over it like this. All I need to do now is to connect my wires to the Raspberry Pi. And the reason that you have 3 cables here, you have one for power, which is a red one normally. You have one for ground, which is the black one. And the blue one is actually for data. So you can control the fan using software. So I think you can set it to, once it gets to X temperature, then it can just cool itself down. The way these cables plug in are going to be red, black and blue, and it's going to be, when holding it like this with the HDMI cables facing you, the HDMI ports facing you, sorry, it's going to be the second one from the top. So you're going to miss the very first one, go to the second one, third, and then fourth, and it's going to be again red, black and blue. So I'm going to try and do it and zoom in as closely as I can. Hopefully it's showing clearly there, but as you can see, I've got red, black and blue, and I've missed the very first pin at the top. I'm going to try and zoom in as much as I can on video and show you exactly what's going on here. Again, I missed the very first pin. The red one goes to the second pin. The black one, which is ground, goes to the third pin, and the blue goes to the fourth pin. Now, when you're closing it, try and be careful and try and lock the the wires inside of the case. Don't let it hang over because there's a groove here, and if you close it over it, it might actually just cut the wire. It does feel very snug, and I'm worried that if it's bent like this for a very long time, it might actually just snap the cable at some point. or snap the connection that goes onto the header, but that's the only way to do it. So I'm going to close this back up. It feels very tight actually. I think the other heat sinks are preventing me from pushing the top of the case down properly, so I'm going to have to take these heat sinks off. I normally have a single fan about a 12mm blowing directly at this, so it normally gets cooled very, very nicely. However, it makes more sense for it to be in a case. Finally got everything inside the case. This actually lines up really nicely, so if you're ever worried about the cables not plugging in properly because the case isn't machined properly, you don't have to worry about that. Everything lines up perfectly fine. Now it's time for the Raspberry Pi 5, and this has been made super simple. Additionally, when the case is closed, there's not only vents at the bottom that the Raspberry Pi 4 didn't have, but if you can look at the video, I'll try and zoom in as much as I can. There's a tiny groove or a tiny slot here where the case of the Raspberry Pi 5 doesn't close all the way, which means that it could pull in extra air from outside rather than simply pulling in from this section here. So we have a vent at the bottom for the Raspberry Pi 5 case, which the Pi 4 doesn't have. We have a case that doesn't seal all the way, so we can pull in or push air out, but everything else is more or less the same for the Pi 4 and the Pi 5 case, except for those two additions, which I think are really good additions actually. For the Pi 5 case, you simply need to pull it off like this, and that's all it is. So when it's locked in like that, you simply pull it from the bottom, the red part comes off, this top piece from the white part does come off as well, but I think you would only need to remove this if you're trying to get the GPIOs when you have it inside the case. As it stands, I don't need this section off at the moment. To get the Pi 5 into the case is more or less exactly the same as the Pi 4. Tilt it, put it in here, and the good thing about the Pi 5 is it has a power button as well, so you can actually manually turn this off, and the power button is accessible from the case. No, I can't hear nothing. Once that's inside the case, you simply have to plug this tiny three pin, this tiny 3-pin thing in, and the connection for it is, there's a label on the Pi that says fan right there. So once this is inside the case, you put this over it, and this part here plugs into that tiny thing there. Now I had to use a pliers to do this the last time, so hopefully I can do it this time without the pliers. Finally got that in. Took me ages to get it in, but once you have the fan plugged in, everything lined up, you simply have to close it down, and that's it. The Raspberry Pi 5 is in its case. The next step is to write Raspberry Pi OS to the memory cards, stick them in, and boot for the first time. You are going to need a mouse and a keyboard if you plan to do things on there, but I'm just going to show the first boot, then show how to do the updates, and then that's it. The easiest way to get the operating system onto the SD card is to go to your web browser, and you're going to Google Raspberry Pi OS. So that's what I've done here. The very first website that comes up is the one you're going to need. I'm going to click on Raspberry Pi OS here, and then from there you can go ahead and download for Windows or for your operating system the Raspberry Pi OS imager, and it's going to download this executable file. You install it like you would any other program, and then from there you're going to be able to write to your SD card. So I'm going to minimize this for now. Let me open my Raspberry Pi OS imager. Click yes. This is what you'll see. The first thing I'm going to do here is to choose my device. So this is going to be the Raspberry Pi 4 first. So click on choose device. I'm going to go Raspberry Pi 4. Choose my operating system. I'm going to go desktop operating system, but I'm going to go with a 64-bit. So choose OS, and from here I'm going to do the very first one that says Raspberry Pi OS 64-bit. Click on that, and then when it says choose storage, I'm going to click on that and choose the only thing I have plugged in at the moment. If you have multiple drives plugged in or multiple memory cards plugged in, please be careful, because this will completely wipe whatever you have on the memory card or the memory stick. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click next. I'm not going to apply any customization settings at the moment. I'm just going to do a normal simple boot and then do an update. Confirm you want everything erased and for it to install the operating system or write the operating system to the memory card. I'm going to click yes. That's going to do its thing. You will see a few windows pop up while this is happening, and they'll close again in some cases. Please don't close anything. Just let it do what it's doing. Once this gets to 100%, it will let you know, and you can then close the windows from there and eject the drive. Everything completed. Now it's saying Raspberry Pi OS 64-bit has been written to generic mass storage, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to click continue here, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the Raspberry Pi 5 straight away. So I'm simply going to eject this drive. I'm going to close this down first. I'm going to click on the arrow. Again, it's going to be the exact same process to write to the Raspberry Pi 5. So I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in Raspberry Pi OS, click on the very first link that comes up, and then from here I'm going to scroll down to where it says download for Windows, macOS, or Ubuntu. So any version of Linux should work fine. Once you've installed this program, you're simply going to open it. So I'm going to open it quickly here. This is what it looks like when it opens up. I'm going to choose my device, and for this one it's going to be the Raspberry Pi 5. For this one I'm going to choose Raspberry Pi OS 64, but it says it's been cached on my computer, which means it doesn't actually have to go ahead and download it. So if I click on this, it should, then I choose my storage, then I click next, it should write to it straight away. This one is also finished. I'm going to click continue. Then I'm going to close it and eject both drives. I'm going to go back to the camera and show how to set everything up, mouse and keyboard, and then show what the first boot is like and how to update the system quickly. So with my Raspberry Pi 4 here, this is a memory stick I'm going to be using, and this is a Raspberry Pi 4. I am going to plug my Ethernet cable in first. Ethernet cable plugged in. Then I'm going to plug in this USB cable here, gives me mouse and keyboard, so I'm going to plug that in as well. But I'm going to use a USB 2 port. It should be more than enough to power it. Finally, I'm going to do the memory card as well. Turn that over and plug it in like so. Slot that in there. This doesn't have a spring release like the older Raspberry Pis do. Then I'm going to go HDMI from my Raspberry Pi to my capture card. So this is the HDMI cable I'm using here. I think this is a mini or micro HDMI. I can never remember which one it is. Capture card here. And go to the capture card input. There we go. Finally, I'm going to plug in the cable for the Raspberry Pi 4. And that simply goes where the USB section is at the back. I can already hear the fan spinning, so everything should be okay. My apologies for the whining. There's not much I can do about it until I change it in software. So this is a Raspberry Pi 4 booted for the very first time, fresh installation. It gives me my IP address straight away. So I am going to click next, and then I'm going to just double check all of this is okay. I don't think I need to change anything here. Country, United Kingdom, language, British English, London time zone. I'm going to leave that as it is. Click on next. Username, you can put whatever you want here. I'm probably just going to put Runs Tech Hub and put password as Runs Tech Hub again, but you should obviously set something more sensible. I'm going to click next after I entered my details. I won't be connecting to any Wi-Fi because I've got my Ethernet cable plugged in. However, if you're using Wi-Fi, simply look through the list on here, find the one that you would normally click on for your mobile phone, your tablet, your laptop, click on that same one and type in the password exactly as you would on those devices. And please keep in mind it is case sensitive, so that means uppercase letters need to be uppercase when typing them in as well. Click next. My default browser, I'm going to be using Chromium. I'm a big Google fan, so I have everything on Google and I can log into Chromium with my Google account. I'm going to leave it as Chromium. Feel free to use Firefox if you want. I like this option here that says tick here to uninstall the unused browser. Raspberry Pis are tiny single board computers and storage is sometimes going to be an issue for some people. So I would uninstall Firefox. I'm never going to use Firefox. If you're somebody that chose to use Firefox, then you might want to choose to uninstall Chromium. If you're going to be using this for web development stuff or for web browsing in general, you might want to leave both of them on there just in case something doesn't work in one browser. You can test it in another one. This is the part I wanted to get to show exactly what needs to be done. So software updates are going to be very, very important for any system. And once I do the software update for the Raspberry Pi 4, I'm going to go through and do exactly these same steps again for the Raspberry Pi 5. There shouldn't be any difference, but this is the stage I wanted to get to just to show that it works and everything's all right. There we go. All system updates have now been installed. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click restart. Let this do its thing. And once that's done, you should have all the new updates and you should be ready to use the system as you would any normal computer. If this is your very first time using a Raspberry Pi 4 or Raspberry Pi 5, or when the Raspberry Pi 6 comes out, it should look relatively similar. This essentially is your start menu. So normally we would have a Windows start menu at the bottom left. For this, it's going to be top left. You can click on the Raspberry Pi icon there and you can see all the categories that you have. So for programming, we have internet, sound and video, graphics, accessories, help, preferences, run and shut down. And just like you would normally go into, let's say I go to internet and I click on Chromium web browser. This is the Chromium web browser here. I'm going to go to youtube.com. This is the Runs Tech Hub channel on YouTube. It loads perfectly fine. All the videos work, no issue whatsoever. Moving on to the Raspberry Pi 5 now, doing exactly the same process. Apologies for the mess, but let's move on to the Raspberry Pi 5 and it's going to be exactly the same process. Plug everything in, turn it on, do the updates, and you should be good to go. So here I've got my memory stick. I'm going to plug that in first. Next, I'm going to go with my Ethernet cable, which goes in here. Next is going to be mouse and keyboard, which I'll use a USB 2 port again because I don't need anything special for that. Then it's going to be HDMI. So again, micro HDMI or mini HDMI, whichever it is. Let me put that to the next one actually, so I can have more space to plug in the micro USB. That's the HDMI cable in. And finally, I'm going to plug in the USB-C. Now, please do keep in mind the plug for the Raspberry Pi 4 and the Raspberry Pi 5 are slightly different. The Raspberry Pi 5's plug is larger and it delivers more power. So once I plug this in, it should start coming on straight away. Again, as you can see, this is the very first boot and it looks exactly the same as the Raspberry Pi 4. The software is the same, so there shouldn't really be any differences. Just like before, my IP address shows up on screen. I'm going to click next. All of this is okay. Leave it the same. For username, I'm going to use the same one as before. Runs Tech Hub. Details in. Click next. Again, I'm using Ethernet cable, so I don't need to connect to a Wi-Fi network. However, if you're not using an Ethernet cable, you will need to select the one that pops up for yours and enter the password. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to be using Chromium again, and I'm going to tick here to uninstall the unused browser. So once again, all this means is that if I choose Chromium, it's going to uninstall Firefox, and if I choose Firefox, it's going to uninstall Chromium. You can only choose one because this is the default browser. It's going to open this browser every time you have a link to click on or a PDF file to open, for example, or anything browser related. It's going to use that one. It's checking for updates. It's going to do its updates, and once it's finished, I'm going to reboot, go back into the system, and do exactly what I did for the Raspberry Pi 4, which is to show where the start menu was, to show how to open Chrome, and just to test using one single website, probably YouTube again. Just as a quick note, there's barely a hum for the Raspberry Pi 5, so even though the fan is on and working perfectly okay, the hum is not even audible at this point. Same as before, I'm going to go to the start menu at the top left. So again, for anyone that didn't watch the Raspberry Pi 4 section, the start menu for this is going to be top left where you see the Raspberry Pi icon. Normally for Windows it's down at the bottom on the left hand side. So I'm going to click on the start menu. I'm going to go over to internet. I'm going to open the Chromium web browser. Let's make this bigger. I'm going to go to youtube.com. Here's Ron's Tech Hub. I'm going to play that first video there. Yeah, plays perfectly fine. No issues here whatsoever. So that's how you fully set up a Raspberry Pi 4 and a Raspberry Pi 5 from scratch. You will need memory cards. You will need memory card readers. You will need to have access to the internet to be able to download the program you need. And then you're good to go. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Hopefully that was useful.